Ucat VR, the hardest Ucat section. Personally, I still have flashbacks whenever I see long paragraphs. I've lost so many friends to it. So that's Ucat VR. Hi guys, and welcome back to this video. Now today I'll be addressing how to take on the verbal reasoning section, so let's get straight into it. So here's some background information about the VR section. Now this consists of 44 questions, each with 1 mark, and you will have 21 minutes to answer all of the questions. That is just under 30 seconds per question. Remember that wise man who said, life is a game, take risks? Yeah, that brother clearly did not know about the Ucat. So here are my tips to help you get the highest score possible, plus some master tips at the end of the video as well. Now there are 3 types of main questions in VR. The easiest ones are the true, false, can't tell questions. For this kind of question, I would always read the statement first and try to associate any keywords or synonyms which could come up in the text. Now, once you've found your keywords, make sure to actually read the sentence in order to make sure whether this information confirms, contradicts, or just doesn't add anything to the sentence. If you don't find supporting pieces of evidence, please don't be afraid to use the can't tell option, as it could still be the correct answer. One thing that's worth mentioning is that the same time period can be written in different ways. For example, World War II ended in 1945, but the passage can say 20th century, which is still correct. The final tip for this kind of question is to understand the difference between definitive and non-definitive statements. Non-definitive statements have words such as could, can, sometimes, likely. For definitive statements, you would see words such as never, always, must, impossible. Now, if you see definitive statements being used, they generally indicate that the answer is either can't tell or it's false. However, with non-definitive statements, they could indicate that the answer is true. Now, the second type of question is slightly more tricky. Now, this is when you're asked about the writer's opinion or attitude on a certain topic in the passage. Bear in mind that these kind of questions can take longer than the others. This is because it's required to read the passage, so please don't hesitate to guess, flag, and go to the next question if you're ever completely stuck. Now, the third type of question is when you receive an incomplete statement and you need to find the correct answer to complete it. Now, there are 2 parts to the statement. The stem is the part that you are given, and the leaf is the part which you have potential answers to. The only way to get better at these questions is through consistent practice. This is because they can take longer than the true, false, can't tell questions. Now let's go through some tips which you must know for VR. First tip is to never confuse your common knowledge with the exam. For example, we all know that Neil Armstrong was the first man on the moon, but that doesn't mean that he was the only man on the voyage. It's very easy to get confused between the two, so you should always use the passage as your main source of info. Even if you're 100% certain that you're right, always confirm with the passage just to secure the bag. Now, tip number 2 is to not search for a certain word in the passage. Now, you can know that people try this and they will substitute those words for synonyms, which basically takes longer to find the answer and basically waste your time. You'll only become faster with consistent practice over a period of time, so don't expect it to happen overnight. Tip number 3 is to not generalize. Now, this is when you create general statements by inferring from specific cases. So for example, if I watch Shrek and I got a great score in the Ucat, that doesn't mean that everyone else who watches Shrek would get a great Ucat score, although that would be quite cool. Tip number 5 is for comprehension questions. If you find a conclusion that makes sense, don't disregard the other options. It's still important to evaluate all of them and go with the one that makes the most sense. Even if you don't find the answer immediately, eliminate each option one by one until you find the correct answer. Now, this tip is if you find yourself running out of time. Guess any answers that you have left. Always use the same letter to answer all of the questions instead of spamming random letters for each one. I found that this gave me a higher chance of success. Now let's move on to my master medicine advice. Or should we call it medvice? No, maybe medicine advice. Yeah. Now my first advice is to line your forefinger horizontally with the screen and move down as you read each line. Try to move your head physically as you read from left to right. Yes, it will make you look like an idiot, but in the test center, no one cares. Because once you enter that exam room, we are all suffering. Yeah? Together. That's the truth. Now the advantages of doing this is that not only will you be encouraged to read at a faster speed, you will also be able to keep track of which line you're on, so you're less likely to waste time. Now my next tip is to triage your questions. Now the reason why is because questions in the Ucat don't follow a chronological order. So it's important to get the short passage questions done as soon as possible. The reason why is because every question in VR is worth 1 mark, regardless of difficulty. So it just makes sense to get the easy ones out of the way first. Now, my final tip is to only use keyboard shortcuts. Using the mouse to click on options for each question takes up extra seconds, which builds up in the Ucat. Here are some shortcuts which are worth memorizing. You should be using them so much to the point where you don't even need to look at the keyboard when you're doing it. Now that's what you need to know about getting at least 650 plus in this section. If you guys found this video helpful, then please let me know what else you would like to see. Thanks for watching and take care.